It wasn't supposed to be legendary. Just a personal project, one man's garage-built hot rod, meant for late-night drives and weekend burger runs. But fate, a magazine cover, and a TV movie would turn it into something far bigger, the single most copied street rod in American history. The car was a 1934 Ford three-window coupe, chopped flamed and unapologetically raw. A black menace with fire licking across its fenders, built by a young Californian named Pete Chapouris. He wasn't a celebrity. He wasn't chasing fame. He just wanted a car that looked and felt like the ones he'd grown up idolizing, the rebellious, imperfect hot rods of the 1950s. No chrome overload, no air conditioning, no showroom shine. Just grit, steel, and soul. When Pete rolled it out of his garage in 1972, the world had already moved on. Hot rods had become clean, polished, and predictable museum pieces instead of street warriors. But Pete's coupe stood there dark and defiant like a ghost from another era. And then Hollywood came calling. A low-budget, made-for-TV movie called The California Kid needed a car that screamed danger, freedom, and rebellion. One photo, a magazine cover, changed everything. Pete's personal ride would become the face of a generation, a rolling symbol of old-school cool. By the time the cameras stopped rolling, the car wasn't just Pete's anymore. It belonged to every hot rodder who ever dreamed of outrunning conformity. Decades later, the flames still burn not just on the paint, but in the legacy it left behind. Because this isn't just a story about a car. It's a story about how authenticity built by hand in a small garage became immortal on television screens around the world. 20 built by Pete Chapouris. Before fame, before legend, there was just Pete and his coupe. Before it became a movie star, before the flames became iconic, Pete Chapouris' 1934 Ford was just a daily driver. His pride, his identity, his rebellion on wheels. Pete was one of those Southern California hot rodders who refused to follow trends. In the early 1970s, when everyone else was obsessed with mirror-smooth paint and chromed-out resto rods, Pete went the other way. He built his coupe raw, purposeful, and traditional, the way real hot rods looked in the 50s and early 60s. He chopped the roof low, sprayed the body in menacing black, and licked it with old-school red and yellow flames. No luxury features, no polish, just pure attitude. Pete's car wasn't a museum piece. It was a living, breathing machine meant to be driven, not displayed. He took it to car meets, burger joints, and local cruises, letting its engine growl through the California night. By 1972, the car was finished and completely out of step with the times. But that was exactly the point. Pete's coupe was a statement, a middle finger to conformity. And soon, fate would reward that defiance in a way he never expected. 19, from magazine cover to movie. One photograph changed everything. A cover shoot for Custom Rod magazine paired Pete's coupe with another black 34, owned by Jim Jake Jacobs. Two flame-painted rebels side by side, the visual screamed attitude. Somewhere in Hollywood, a producer saw that cover. ABC was developing a low-budget TV movie about a rebellious young man taking on a corrupt small-town sheriff. They needed a car that matched the tone, something that felt dangerous, wild, untamed. That magazine cover landed on the right desk at the perfect time. Within weeks, the producers tracked down Pete and asked if they could use his car for the film. Pete said yes. Why not? It sounded fun. No one, not even Pete, realized that this small TV project, The California Kid, would transform his personal hot rod into one of the most famous automotive icons ever built. It was pure coincidence, the kind of Hollywood magic you can't plan. 18. The birth of Pete and Jake's. When the movie aired in 1974, something crazy happened. Every car guy in America wanted that car, the black coupe with flames. Pete's phone rang non-stop. People begged to buy it or begged him to build one just like it. They wanted the parts, the stance, the whole vibe. Pete realized there was a hunger out there for real hot rods, not the over-restored shiny cars that had dominated for years. So he teamed up with Jake, the same guy from that magazine shoot, and opened Pete and Jake's Hot Rod Parts. Their timing couldn't have been better. The California Kid car had just aired on national TV, inspiring a new wave of traditional hot rodding. Their shop became the beating heart of the movement, a mecca for anyone who wanted to build an authentic car with soul. They sold everything from dropped axles and steel wheels to speed parts that looked like they came straight out of 1958. Their logo, a cartoon version of Pete's coupe Black Flame Defiant. That car didn't just spark a business, it resurrected a culture. 17. Old school on purpose. In 1972, everyone was modernizing their builds, smoother bodies, plush interiors, automatic transmissions. Pete wanted none of that. He set out to make his coupe a time capsule. Flat black paint, red and yellow flames, steel wheels painted to match, bias ply tires that roared and rattled on asphalt. Under the hood, he swapped in a small block Chevy, instead of a flathead, not for show, but for reliability. Every inch of the car paid homage to how hot rods looked in 1958. Even the stance, slightly nose down tight over the tires, was calculated to perfection. Pete wanted the coupe to feel aggressive, without looking cartoonish. It was rebel design disguised as nostalgia. His build sent a message. Hot rodding wasn't about money or chrome. It was about emotion, about building something that screamed individuality. While others chased trophies, Pete built something that moved people. And it worked. His car reignited America's love affair with imperfection. 16. Halibrands to Steelies. When the film crew came to pick up the car, they had one major problem with it, the wheels. Pete had outfitted the coupe with gorgeous Halibrand magnesium racing wheels, a staple of 1950s competition cars. But to the producers, they looked too expensive, too fancy for a rebellious kid from a dusty California town. They told Pete, "We need it to look like something a real kid could build in his garage." So out came the Halibrands. In went a set of cheap red steel wheels with baby moon hubcaps. It was a small change with massive consequences. The red wheels looked meaner, simpler, more grounded. They gave the car a working-class attitude that fit perfectly with the movie's tone. After filming, Pete switched back to his original wheels, but it was too late. The movie version had burned itself into the public imagination. To this day, when people picture the California Kid, they see those red Steelies born from a studio's cost-cutting choice. Sometimes, authenticity isn't what you build. It's what the world remembers. From the garage to Hollywood, from rebellion to fame, the foundations of a legend had been laid. And yet the real transformation was only beginning. 15. The fake side pipes. Hollywood, as always, couldn't resist adding its own magic. When the movie crew got their hands on Pete's coupe, they bolted on something he absolutely hated. Fake chrome side pipes. They weren't connected to the exhaust, didn't do anything except sparkle under studio lights. To Pete, it was sacrilege. This was a car built from the heart raw, functional, and true to traditional hot rodding. And now, there were shiny, useless tubes hanging off the side like costume jewelry. The producers didn't care. They said it made the car look faster, more dangerous. Pete gritted his teeth and let it happen. But during filming, those pipes constantly rattled loose, scraping along the ground. The crew had to stop multiple times to bolt them back on. Pete couldn't wait for the shoot to be over, because the first thing he did when the camera stopped rolling was grab a wrench and tear those things off. He threw them in the trash without hesitation, and yet there they remain forever immortalized on film. Even today, fans at car shows still ask him about those pipes. 50 years later, they're still driving him crazy. 14. The C-channel rear bumper. If the front of the car was all aggression, the rear was pure craftsmanship. Pete built a custom rear bumper from C-channel steel, not a factory part, not something off a shelf. He welded it by hand, shaping it to hug the body tight and clean. No bulky chrome bars, no extra weight. It was minimalist and tough, exactly what a real hot rod should be. The simplicity was its genius. That bumper design became another defining feature of the California Kid. After the movie aired, builders across the country started copying it. Shops began selling C-channel rear bumpers inspired by Pete's handmade design. What started as a functional choice became a cultural trend. Even today, that tucked purposeful rear end remains one of the most imitated elements in the world of classic hot rods. 13. The three-window star. If you were to design the perfect hot rod body, you'd probably end up with a 1934 Ford three-window coupe. It's sleek, rare, and endlessly photogenic, especially when chopped. Pete's car wasn't fiberglass or a replica. It was pure Henry Ford steel, the real deal from Detroit's golden age. In the movie, that shape dominated every frame. Martin Sheen may have been the build star, but the coupe was the one audiences fell in love with. It looked alive, crouched low, snarling, ready to strike. When McCord drove it through town, the rumble of that small block Chevy made you feel the car's attitude. It wasn't just a vehicle, it was a character. After the movie, the value of three-window coupes skyrocketed. Everyone wanted one. They became the holy grail of hot rod bodies, sleek, muscular, and dripping with nostalgia. And all because one young builder's car happened to end up on television. 12 Buzz's garage pit scenes. Some of the most memorable moments in The California Kid weren't on the open road, they were inside Buzz's garage. McCord, played by Sheen, working under the car, wrench in hand, sweat dripping under dim light. The coupe perched on old wooden ramps above an oil-stained grease pit. This wasn't some shiny Hollywood workshop, it was the real deal. Those scenes mattered because they showed something authentic. They revealed the soul of hot rodding, the long nights, the dirt, the danger. You could almost smell the gasoline and burnt oil. The ramps creaked with tension. The car could have slipped at any moment. That realism came straight from Pete's actual setup. He didn't build cars in luxury. He built them like every real enthusiast, with grit and resourcefulness. Those garage scenes captured that, perfectly grounding the film in real-world passion. It wasn't fantasy. It was history. 11. Dialogue that sold speed. 75 miles an hour in 10 seconds. That single line of dialogue turned the coupe into a legend. In the movie, McCord brags about his car's power, a challenge to anyone who doubted him. And while that figure might have been exaggerated, it didn't matter. The line felt real. It sounded like something a gearhead would actually say. Pete's car could move small block Chevy 4-barrel carb headers, dual exhaust, and a 3-speed transmission. It wasn't a showpiece. It was built to run. The movie's dialogue cemented that reputation. Audiences believed it. The car wasn't just cool. It was fast. That's what made The California Kid so powerful. It blended myth and machinery until the two became inseparable. A car that talked through chrome flame and attitude, and a single unforgettable boast that echoed for generations. By the time filming wrapped, Pete's coupe had changed not just physically, but symbolically. It had gone from a garage-built rebel to a full-blown American myth. But once the camera stopped, Pete was ready to reclaim what was his. He didn't want a movie prop. He wanted his hot rod back. 10. The Post-Movie Revert. The moment the camera stopped rolling, Pete got to work. Hollywood had borrowed his car. Now it was time to take it back. He started by tearing off the fake side pipes, the ones that clattered through every driving scene. Gone. Straight into the trash. Next, he removed the red steel wheels and replaced them with his beloved Halibrands mags. Camera mounts, drilled brackets, and quick-fix holes all gone too. But here's the interesting part. Pete didn't undo everything. The stance stayed. The flames remained. That identity, that attitude, it had fused with the car's DNA. He might not have asked for it, but the California Kid had been born, and there was no going back. From that moment on, no matter how many shows he attended, no matter where he drove, people no longer said, "Hey, that's Pete's coupe." They said, "That's the California Kid." His personal hot rod had become a cultural landmark, trapped forever in its own legend. 9. The name that Hollywood gave. Before the film, the car didn't even have a name. It was just Pete's 34 Coupe. But the movie's title, The California Kid, changed everything. The phrase rolled off the tongue. It sounded rebellious, untamed, iconic. After the movie aired, the name stuck like glue. Even people who had never seen the film knew The California Kid. It transcended the movie. It became the identity of the car itself. Soon, any black 34 Ford with flames was being called a California Kid clone. The nickname turned into a genre, a style that builders all over the world tried to recreate. Ironically, Pete never named it that. Hollywood did. But sometimes, what the world decides to call you becomes stronger than what you call yourself. 8. Industry icon status. After the movie aired, the streets filled with imitators. Car shows were suddenly packed with black 3-window coupes, red flames, red wheels, everyone chasing the same look. Some were tributes, others were blatant copies. But one thing was certain, the original had sparked a movement. Fiberglass companies started producing replica bodies. Model kit manufacturers released California Kid editions. Die-cast versions appeared in toy stores. Posters, t-shirt stickers, the car became an empire. It was no longer just Pete's coupe. It was a symbol of rebellion and craftsmanship. Incredibly, it became the most copied hot rod in American history. Even the famous graffiti coupe couldn't match its influence. Everywhere you looked there, it was 1,000 versions of Pete's dream car, each one a little different, but all carrying the same soul. When something you build by hand becomes part of pop culture, that's not imitation. That's immortality. 7. The producer with a pedigree. Every legend needs a visionary to push it forward. And for the California Kid, that man was Howie Horwitz. Horwitz wasn't some small-time TV producer. He had worked on Batman and the Green Hornet. He knew the power of vehicles on screen. He understood that the right car could become the character that defines a show. When he saw Pete's coupe on that magazine cover, he knew instantly this was the one. He fought for it, convincing ABC to cover the costs of transport insurance and modifications. He understood that audiences wouldn't remember the villain or the dialogue, they'd remember the car. He was right. Horwitz's experience with television's most famous rides gave him a filmmaker's eye. He knew how to light it, how to shoot it, how to make it heroic. And in doing so, he turned a modest TV project into a cornerstone of car culture. Without him, the California Kid might have stayed just another cool street rod in a quiet California garage. 6. The chrome delete before it was cool. Decades before blackout cars became trendy, Pete was already doing it by necessity and by choice. Chrome was expensive, and he believed too much shine made a car look soft. So he stripped almost every piece of bright work off the coupe. No chrome bumpers, no shiny grille, no trim. Just black steel and raw intent. The only bits of chrome left were the door handles and a few small functional pieces, enough to keep it grounded in reality. Everything else was paint body color or flat black. The result, a car that looked dangerous, serious, alive. Pete wasn't chasing style. He was chasing truth. Real hot rodders from the 50s couldn't afford chrome. They painted their cars out of necessity, but that scarcity became beauty. Pete studied old magazines and photos to make sure every choice was period correct. That chrome delete look became one of the most copied styling cues in hot rodding. It was rebellion distilled into steel. While others polished, Pete stripped away the gloss and accidentally created an aesthetic that builders still follow 50 years later. By the time those 5 facts play out, one thing is clear. The California Kid wasn't famous because it was perfect. It was famous because it was honest. Every imperfection, every handmade detail, every creative rebellion, all of it told a story. And that story wasn't finished yet. Because what came next? The Flames the Club. The legend would turn Pete's coupe from a cult favorite into a living, roaring piece of American history. 5. The Flames that never faded. If there was one thing that made the car instantly recognizable, it was the flames. Those vivid hand-laid red, orange, and yellow licks across the jet black paint became its identity. They weren't added for the movie. They were Pete's creation, painted before Hollywood ever called. To him, they represented movement, aggression, life. During filming, producers suggested making them bigger and wilder to pop on camera. Pete refused. "These are my flames," he said. "They stay the way they are. and that decision preserved one of the most iconic paint jobs in automotive history. When the cameras rolled, the flames danced under the studio lights, catching reflections like fire itself. They were perfect, timeless, not trendy. Every promotional photo, every magazine cover, every poster centered on that fiery design. And long after the movie faded from memory, those flames lived on. Decades later, the same pattern still adorns the car restored, retouched, but never changed. Builders across the world have copied it, tracing the exact shapes in hopes of capturing that same spirit. Because when you see black paint with those flames licking up the fenders, you don't just see style, you see rebellion in color form. 4. The vintage tin legacy. Long before traditional hot rod became a hashtag, Pete was part of a small, serious club called Vintage Tin. This wasn't a group of casual enthusiasts. They were historians, builders, and purists. They studied how cars were built in the 40s and 50s, and they recreated that process exactly. No shortcuts, no billet aluminum, no modern kits, just steel sweat and authenticity. That club shaped Pete's mindset when building his coupe. Every detail was filtered through that old-school lens. Would this have existed in 1958? Would a kid back then have done it this way? The result was a car that didn't just look right on screen. It felt right. When the film was set in the late 50s, Pete's coupe fit perfectly. No visual anachronisms, no modern giveaways. The movie's time setting and Pete's craftsmanship aligned in beautiful coincidence. And that's why 50 years later, it still looks correct. It's not stuck in time, it defines the time. That's the power of building something with authenticity. It never goes out of style. 3. The red wheel confusion. Remember those red steel wheels from the movie? They weren't supposed to be there yet. They became the look most people remember. Photographers snapped hundreds of stills during production. The coupe on set parked near the garage, the stunt rig hidden behind it. Every single one showed those red wheels and baby moon hubcaps. When magazines published those photos, they spread everywhere across America, then around the world. For many fans who had never seen the actual car, those stills were the car. The red wheels became part of its identity, even though Pete had put his Halibrands back on almost immediately. To this day, hot rodders debate which version is the real California Kid. The movie car with Steelies, or the street car with Halibrands. The truth is, both are right. The movie immortalized the look, and the man who built it gave it soul. The confusion didn't bother Pete much. He understood that once something enters pop culture, it stops belonging to its creator. The public decides what's iconic, and they chose red wheels, chrome baby moons, and a black coupe tearing through a dusty California town. 2. Lifelong showpiece. Half a century later, the California Kid still draws crowds. Pete could never have imagined that the car he built in a small garage would one day sit on display at events like SEMA or the Grand National Roadster Show. But it does gleaming under spotlights, still carrying the same attitude it had in 1974. He never treated it like a museum piece, though. The car still runs. Pete would fire up the small block Chevy and drive it into the event grounds himself. The exhaust crackle, the idle lope, that sound reminded everyone why it mattered. 3 generations of fans have now seen it in person. Grandfathers who watched the TV movie in the 70s, their children who saw it at car shows in the 90s, and their grandchildren discovering it fresh today. It's more than nostalgia. It's living heritage. The California Kid didn't just preserve hot rod history. It taught it. Every line, every weld, every imperfection tells a story about what it means to build something from passion, not profit. And as Pete aged, the car became part of his identity. His life's work made tangible. He may have driven hundreds of cars, built dozens of customs, but this one was different. This one carried his fingerprint in every panel. It wasn't perfect, but it was eternal. By now, it's easy to see that the California Kid wasn't just a car that appeared in a movie. It was the movie. The heart, the soul, and the reason anyone still remembers it half a century later. But one last truth remains the biggest, strangest fact of them all. That car became so famous it outlived the story that birthed it. 1. The car that outlived the movie. Ask any car enthusiast about the California Kid and they'll smile, not because they remember the plot, but because they remember the car. The sleek black 34 Ford with flames chopping through the desert dust like a rebel outlaw on 4 wheels. Ask them what the movie was actually about, though, and most will hesitate. Something about a sheriff, Martin Sheen, a chase, a cliff maybe. But the story, long forgotten. What they do remember is that coupe, the attitude, the sound, the stance, every angle, every frame burned into memory. The irony is beautiful. A made-for-TV movie shot on a modest budget in 1974 vanished into pop culture fog while the car became immortal. In a way, that's the ultimate weird fact of all the prop outlived the production. Television was supposed to be disposable. Watch it once, move on. But this car refused to disappear. It lived on magazine covers, posters, t-shirts, model kits, even dreams. Pete Chapouris built it because he loved the past, but in doing so, he accidentally built the future of hot rodding. His coupe became a blueprint, a set of rules, a philosophy. Keep it raw. Keep it real. Build from passion, not from polish. The California Kid was rebellion in metal form, a middle finger to the overbuilt, over-restored cars of its time. And that's why it lasted. Because rebellion never really ages, it just changes shape. For Pete, that car was a friend, a statement, and a story. Every time he fired up the engine, it reminded him of why he built it in the first place. Not for fame, not for Hollywood, for the love of it. And maybe that's why the legend still feels so alive. Because deep down, everyone who sees that coupe understands what it represents, the spark of a dream built by hand, the kind that can't be bought, replicated, or forgotten. So yes, the sheriff, the chase, the cliff, all faded away. But the flames stayed burning, and 50 years later, the California Kid still roars. A black coupe that started in one man's garage and drove straight into immortality. When you step back and look at the full story, it's hard not to feel a kind of awe. Because the California Kid isn't just a car story. It's a story about identity, legacy, and what happens when something built from the heart takes on a life of its own. It began with a young man in a garage hammering steel and chasing a feeling. Pete Chapouris wasn't trying to make history. He just wanted to build a hot rod that felt real, something that captured the raw, reckless spirit of 1950s California. But what he unknowingly created was a time capsule, a black flame-laced symbol that would outlive every car trend that came after it. From 20 to 1, the evolution of the car mirrors, the evolution of hot rodding itself, a rebellion born in backyards, refined in garages, and immortalized on screen. It started as Pete's personal project, built out of passion, then discovered by pure chance, a magazine cover that caught the eye of a Hollywood producer. That single moment turned a garage-built coupe into a national phenomenon. And yet, through every stage, the fake pipes, the red wheels, the C-channel bumper, the perfect stance, one thing stayed constant: authenticity. That's what people connected to. The California Kid didn't need CGI or million-dollar effects. It didn't even need dialogue. Its presence on screen was enough. The hum of the engine, the curve of the fenders, the flames that seemed to breathe as the car flew down that dusty road. What's most extraordinary is how its influence never faded. It sparked Pete and Jake's Hot Rod Parts, a business that would help revive traditional hot rodding across America. It inspired generations of builders to embrace imperfection, to celebrate the handmade. It taught them that cool doesn't come from chrome, or cash, it comes from character. Today, that same 1934 Ford still exists, running alive and loved. It's appeared at Goodwood SEMA, in countless shows, still drawing crowds of every age. Kids who weren't even born when the film aired can spot it instantly. That's not nostalgia, that's legacy. And it's worth noting, while most movie cars fade into museum silence, this one still roars under its own power. No trailers, no velvet ropes, just the sound of a small block Chevy breathing life into history. The California Kid proves that sometimes the truest legends aren't created in studios or boardrooms. They're forged in the quiet hours of a garage by someone who simply refuses to follow the rules. It also reminds us of something timeless about Hollywood. Sometimes the prop is the story. The thing built to support the film ends up eclipsing the film itself. And that's the case here, because while few remember the plot of The California Kid, the image of that black 34 Ford will never fade. It's the perfect paradox, a car that rebelled against conformity by staying traditional, a hot rod that became a hero, a flame job that became a flag for every gearhead who ever built something with their own two hands. And when you think about it, maybe that's the real beauty of this tale. It's not about fame or money or Hollywood polish. It's about a simple truth that transcends decades. When you build something with love, it can outlast you. Pete Chapouris didn't just build a car. He built a legend, one that still rumbles through time, painted in fire and forged in spirit. And as long as there are people who love the smell of gasoline, the glint of steel, and the hum of rebellion, the California Kid will keep driving. Because some stories don't end when the film fades to black. Some stories keep rolling mile after mile, generation after generation. And this one, it's still roaring down that endless California highway.